in the wake of South Central, in the wake of incendiary collisions between races, religions, and ethnic cultures, America still finds right in front of its nose the issue that was here when we were founded, is here today, and will be here for how many tomorrows? The issue is race. We have assembled a distinguished group of activists, scholars, and policymakers to help us make sense of what may be the nation's most important piece of unfinished business. By way of introduction, our panelists are Alan Keyes, the Republican candidate for the United States Senate in Maryland; Richard Nathan, head of the Rockefeller Institute of Government at SUNY Albany; rap musician and activist Sister Souljah; author, educator Jonathan Kozol; performance artist and playwright Anna Deavere Smith; Boston University President John Silber; Mayor Sharon Pratt Kelly of Washington, D.C., and Dhoruba bin Wahad, an activist and former Black Panther. Thank you all for...
This is a really nice panel. I ain't gonna hold you. I'm shocked. We got politicians up here. We got a former Black Panther. This is where I feel like we've taken a step back. We have what appears to be white and Jewish people on this panel. Today, you could not have this panel because people will be just infuriated about the fact that you have these people on this panel speaking about race. Specifically, I'm assuming black and white issues. They would be shut down. Like, what has happened? What has happened?
Rights activists of the 50s and 60s cannot be called cynical for asking, we have overcome what? And there are not a few people out there now saying it's worse now than it ever has been. We have more divisions today than ever before. May I ask you to begin our program, President John Silber?
Yes, to say things have not changed is to distort the facts beyond recognition. Things have changed immeasurably. There are many improvements that we should not overlook despite the fact that much remains to be done. We should remember that in 1965, you didn't even have blacks able to attend restaurants in most cities. They couldn't even use the bathroom or the toilet in a U.S. highway. These conditions, at least, have been overcome. One thing we do have to recognize, however, is that the corrective measures that should have been taken in the middle 60s to help and support black families were not done. The provision of preschool education, Head Start opportunities for black children and for poor children generally was not done in any substantial way.
President Silber, you sit next to the first black woman to ascend to the office of mayor of a major industrial city. I speak of the District of Columbia, Mayor Sharon Pratt Kelly. To which comments you would respond how, Mayor Kelly?
Well, I guess I'd have to respond two ways. I'd say that we as African Americans have achieved against incredible odds to the extent that we didn't even get the first window of opportunity to have access to the American dream until the 1960s.
Dare I say not true. African Americans are doing a lot better, economically speaking, post-slavery, pre-civil rights. They were building their own places. They were building their own universities where black folks stayed in one community because that's all you could do because of segregation. You had all these different types of people and walks of life knowing each other. So to say that there was not the American dream, it was, but it was just our own different little American dream that African Americans and black folks had created at that time. It was very segregated, but economically speaking, that was the best time for blacks. Post-civil rights is when things start to get a little dicey. We could talk about other things like the government involvement in drugs and all this stuff that also cause a lot of issues in the black community to fall apart. But yeah, I wouldn't say that we didn't have like any opportunities and we were just like down in the doldrums. We were doing really well at that time.
On the occasion of having a comment of hers criticized by Governor Bill Clinton, Sister Souljah, a raptivist, a musical artist, and also a political activist, found herself on the cover of Newsweek magazine. Sister Souljah, what are your thoughts as you listen in on these opening comments?
I think that there have been gains for individual people, but we as African people, as a collective, have not moved forward as we should.
Agreed. I agree. There's a lot of individuality, and I think that's even where we get the whole terms of like, they did it, why can't you guys do it? I personally am very individualistic. I need to make better choices for myself, and so that I can get ahead and so my family can get ahead. I'm not doing it from an aspect of like, I'm doing these things and I'm making these moves for my community. Almost like communistic aspect of like, the community comes first. Like, bump all that. Like, seriously.
And most of the time, the African people that you have that are able to occupy the positions of mayors and governors do not occupy it forcefully and forthrightly for the collective of African people.
Also true. If we look at American politics, it's all about the majority. The majority rules. So if you are in a predominantly African American area and they're the majority and they're the ones who are the most politically active, the one who's given the most money, then yeah, they are going to be the ones that you deal with. If it's like a 0.5 population of white folks, they could be active and politically active too, and your job is just as much for them as it is for the black people in your area that you occupy and that you are supposed to serve, but they're not going to get their voices as heard as much because, once again, they aren't the majority. That's how American politics works. So with African Americans and black people being scattered, you're not going to end being only 13% and probably even lower than that of the population. Only in these certain subsects and certain pockets where there's a lot of black people are you going to get people who their job would be and should be for those people in the places that they occupy. Period. So, yeah, it's not going to be for a collective because the collective is spread out. It's not like 13% of black folks are all living in one area. And if they were, then yes, those people in those areas will want to do the best that they can for their people because that's how they get elected. A lot of these people do not live in the areas in which they are supposed to serve, which is why they could say and write in a lot of policies that don't really have anything necessarily to do with them. They could talk about having to raise certain taxes and having to give certain things to certain people because it doesn't affect them. They live up in the hills or they live maybe a district over, so they don't necessarily have to deal with the ramifications of their politics.
And as a result, what you have is millions of young African and Latino children and youth who are in a state of total chaos, who don't have skills and don't have any idea how they're going to develop their skills and are estranged from even the adults in their own race because of the problem of not dealing with white racism and the real impact that it has on our lives.
White racism today, no. Historically speaking, how a lot of these policies have been put in place, prison pipeline, when it comes to all this stuff, a lot of these things have been written into law, which some of it were by racists. We could look at Hillary Clinton and her family and their ties. We could look at Joe Biden, his ties to the Ku Klux Klan member. And you could say, yeah, he apologized for it. The fact that you are connected to somebody like that is telling enough. It's telling enough. So if you have somebody who is racist and they're in that position of power and they have a hatred for their constituents and for the people they're supposed to serve, then yeah, I can see that definitely happening. I wouldn't attribute that to white racism, though. Currently. I wouldn't say that currently I would consider that necessarily white racism. You might say it is because some of these people who do have some racist past and have been connected to certain racist people who we know are prominent racists these days, and that's what guides their policies. Sure, maybe you could say that, but personally, I would say it's more governmental than it is like white racism, like as like some type of God who like is out to destroy the black community.
Increasing numbers of black Americans, including you, Dr. Keyes, have stood to say that too many minority people in this country have internalized the process of the dole, of the handout. Woe is me, I'm black and therefore I can do nothing. I received a terrible education in a racist society. Where is my handout? Is that a fair characterization of your feeling about what has happened to the spirit and the soul of some minority people in this country?
When it comes to the handout, I feel like that's even worse these days. You can't be waiting around for the reparation rain. And I'm just like, if it never comes in your lifetime, what are you going to do for yourself? I'm not attaching my horse to the whole reparations thing. I'm like, you guys make some fair arguments for it, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to happen. I really don't. I don't think it's going to happen. And because I'm a Scrooge on that regard, I'm a Grinch, I'm like, well, there's certain things that I can do to put myself ahead. I'm not going to just wait for this thing to just happen for me. When it comes to handouts, especially now, people are saying because they are black, they are entitled to certain things. I think work at the end of the day, regardless of what you do, allows you certain opportunities in general. You could work your butt off your whole entire life and not get anywhere, but I think you would still get a lot further than a lot of people who don't.
Mr. Bin Wahad, you seem to be going kaboom to the entire white community. Do we have from you a spirit of belief that there really are out there in America white folks who do not suffer from the pathology that Sister Souljah reminds us does exist in this country?
There's a few white folks out there. Okay, have fun. That has nothing to do with me. That has nothing to do with me. I can care less. You can't wait around for other people to feel positively or be upset that people feel negatively about you. At the end of the day, you gotta do what you gotta do for you. That's my thoughts. But, kinfolk, let me know what you think in the comment section below, how you feel about it. And if you made it this far, go ahead and like the video as well. As always, kinfolk, you know I love you, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.